Welcome to Untamed and Unfiltered Wellness, the podcast where we're tearing up the rulebook of conventional wellness because one size fits all never fits anyone. I'm your host, Jo Swenson, herbalist and founder of Olivia Bell. As I was flipping through the recipe book my grandmother made for me, I had this realization. My grandmother made food from scratch practically every day. Not as a hobby, just as normal life. Cooking from scratch wasn't some kind of wellness trend, it was Tuesday. And it made me wonder something. When did we stop living like this? I recently read a quote from the Dalai Lama that really has me questioning what it means to live well. When asked what surprised him about humanity, the Dalai Lama replied, "Man, because he sacrifices his health to make money, then he sacrifices his money to recuperate his health. He lives as though he is never going to die and dies having never really lived." This is episode 2 of our 6-part series on living well. Last week, we talked about what is living well. And I asked you to pay attention during the week to the moments where you actually felt like you were living. Not when you're being productive, but when you were actually experiencing your life instead of just going through the motions. And that exercise raised some interesting questions. Who determines what it means to live well? Every generation inherits a definition of what that means. We absorb it from our families, from society, from the culture we grow up in. And most of the time, we never really stop to examine it. We just assume that the definition we inherited is the right one. If you look at history, that definition has changed. And I really think it's changed more in the last century than any other time. Because life before World War II was very different than how we're living now. People walked more because they had to. Meals were cooked at home, and life had a slower rhythm. Not necessarily easier or better, but different. Then something gradually started to shift. Cars replaced the walking, supermarkets replaced the neighborhood grocer, frozen and fast foods became the norm, and convenience became the priority. To be fair, modern life has solved a lot of problems. I know I can't live without air conditioning, and I really like the fact that I can drive my car to wherever I want to go. These things make life easier for everyone. They change how we move, how we eat, how we spend our time, without us really noticing. But over time, those changes started to shape how society defined living well. Success, productivity, efficiency, and speed. Hello, next day delivery. Which brings me to the question I keep coming back to. Did society redefine living well, or did we simply inherit a definition that was shaped by a very different world? So, how do you define living well? For me, it's waking up without an alarm, sleeping on my own terms, having less stress, working because I want to. A lot of people will say, well, that sounds like retirement. Why do you have to wait for retirement to live well? Why can't we live well every day? Recently, there's been more conversation about something called slow living. And I know it sounds like some lifestyle trend, but if you take a closer look, it's really just a question. What if living well isn't about doing more? What if it's about being more intentional with the way that we live? Not rejecting modern life, but becoming more aware of the pace that society has defined for us, and then deciding whether or not it actually works for you. So here's a simple challenge, something that I want you to try this week, and it's just one thing. Make something from scratch. Maybe it's a recipe that you've been wanting to make or one that's been passed down through your family. Maybe you want to resurrect Sunday dinner. But make something that takes a little time. And while you're making it, just notice. Notice what it feels like to slow down, what thoughts come up, because sometimes the simplest moments are the ones that raise the most interesting questions and provide the most insight. So, what does it mean to live well to you? If this question stuck with you today, I wrote a companion piece over on Substack where we can explore this idea a little bit further. You'll also find reflection questions from this episode there if you want to spend a little more time thinking about who defined living well for you. The link is in the show notes. In our next episode, we're going to take this conversation a step further because once we start questioning society's definition of living well, the next question becomes much more personal. I hope you make some time today and every day for some peace, some plants, and some pause. Thank you so much for listening to Untamed and Unfiltered Wellness.